Good afternoon and welcome, Excellencies and distinguished guests. Excellences et invités distingués, nous vous souhaitons la bienvenue. We trust that this hour together will be insightful and inspiring, a hope-filled oasis in the midst of this season of uncertainty and unprecedented times. Today, we're honored to have Mr. Rob Wildeboer, Executive Chairman of Martinrea International and a leader in the Canadian automotive industry, give his perspective on how to navigate international business in 2022. My name is Darlene McLean. I give leadership to the Christian Embassy team. And so I want to just give you a quick overview of our work. The Christian Embassy is an NGO that has served political, diplomatic, and business leaders in Canada for 37 years. Our goal is to network, inspire, and support you in the professional, personal, and spiritual spheres of your life. The foundation of our work is individual, face-to-face meetings focused on mutual learning as we seek to invest in and encourage you in your leadership. We connect Canadian and international leaders who share similar interests to facilitate collaboration and potential partnerships in Canada and around the world. Roundtable discussions with experts are of great interest, from election analyses to international development topics. Leaders have the opportunity to hear from one another. At luncheons, dinners, or interactive webinars, typically we gather leaders from the three spheres to hear inspirational speakers, to network around tables, or to ask their questions. A favorite initiative is our Ambassador Business Tour, where 3 ambassadors are invited to discover a certain region of Canada, its business innovations and culture. And a highlight is being hosted in the homes of local leaders and meeting with political leaders in their area. Since 1984, we have served as a bridge between leaders in Canada and around the world through our international delegations, where Canadian leaders travel to other countries to learn from and inspire government and professional leaders. The love of God and the values of Jesus are our motivation, and the Bible our source of inspiration. We welcome those of all faiths and none. You're invited to participate with us through our initiatives in Canada or through other Christian embassies in 12 international cities. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Wellum, CEO at Rocklink Investment Partners, an adjunct lecturer of business at Redeemer College, a wise, principled, and disciplined man whose faith undergirds all that he does.
Thank you very much, Darlene. It's a privilege to introduce Rob Wildeboer. He's the executive chairman and co-founder of Martinrea International. In 2001, Martinrea became a public company and of great interest to us in the investment community. At Martinrea, Rob is focused on the company's culture, vision, and principles, with a commitment to the company's most important assets, its people. Now, prior to co-founding Martinrea, Rob was also a partner at Wildeboer Delis, a law firm that practices corporate securities lending, tax, and real estate law, and he co-founded that back in 1993. Rob is very entrepreneurial, involved in a number of interesting investments, and has served as a director and officer on a number of private and public companies. To the conversation that we're going to have today, Rob is the co-chair of the Canadian Automotive Partnership Council, and more recently has been on the COVID-19 task force. He's a present and past advisor to the governments of Canada and Ontario on a variety of economic, trade, investment, industry, innovation, manufacturing, and automotive mandates. And he's also the past chair and of several leading Canadian think tanks. Basically, he's a very busy guy, and he's been involved in a lot of interesting areas. And so we're really excited to have him on the call here and be able to talk with him. He has an extensive educational background, undergraduate degree from the University of Guelph, a law degree from Osgoode Hall, MBA from York University, and a Master of Law degree from Harvard University. And he's also received a number of important accolades from his universities and in recognition of his career achievements. I've known Rob for at least 16 years, and I've benefited immensely from his wise counsel and industry insights, particularly when you're in the investment industry. You can get a good handle on what's happening in a lot of industries when you're looking at the auto industry. Rob is a committed Christian in his faith He's a straight shooter, which I really like. He calls it as he sees it. Most importantly, he loves to drive his Ford F-150 pickup, and I've never seen him wear a tie. So I'm not wearing a tie either today, Rob. Over to you. We're looking forward to your introductory comments.
Just in case. It's a real privilege to be here. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Darlene. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm tremendously supportive of this ministry and this group. And we've had the privilege at Martinrea of doing a number of plant tours or office tours to ambassadors over the years. And the people that do the visiting and also those that host the ambassadors love it. We've had ambassadors from Asia, Africa, South America, and Europe. So I thought what I'd do is just for a few minutes show a few slides that show a little bit about Martinrea and background, and I'll go through them quite quickly. We're a public company. A lot of this is listed on our website. As Jonathan said, we're a public company. We basically started in the auto business in 2001. We specialize in lightweight structures and propulsion systems. But to give you a sense of the scope of our operations, we're in 57 locations in 10 countries on 5 continents, and we have about 16,000 people. You can read about us. We're public. We're listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange under the symbol MRE. Our enterprise value is about $2 billion. And our sales this year should exceed $4 billion. So we've grown from 0 to 4 billion over about a 20-year period. It's all about culture. I think in terms of a sustainable business, everyone talks about sustainable businesses. And in order to be sustainable, you have to be in business. But we've spent a lot of time over the years working out what our vision is. And I won't read every word, but the vision itself, making lives better by being the best supplier we can be in the products we make and the services we provide. That's something that we talk about every day. It's on the walls in our plants. It's all about making lives better of the people that work here and also the people that we serve, whether it's communities or whether it's customers. It's the best supplier we can be. We measure against ourselves, continuous improvement, as opposed to a third-party benchmark. And whatever we make and services we provide. We do more than auto parts, and I'll probably touch on that a little later. Our mission, basically, take care of our customers, take care of our people, take care of our investors, both our lenders and our shareholders, and also be good to our communities. So the guiding principles are fundamental. A lot of people have vision statements. We spent a lot of time over the years working on guiding principles that 100 people had inside it. We had a pen. We amended them over the years. The fundamental one at the start is the most important, I think, but they're all important. The golden rule: treat people the way you want to treat yourself. Treat everyone with dignity and respect. It's a Christian principle, but it's a great principle for business. It's a great principle for diplomacy. It's a great principle for countries to deal with each other, and a lot of you are focused on that. But I think you'd probably agree with me that it's a principle that works well. And then as you go through, there's a number of others about excellence and working together and being a team and thinking differently. And at the end, leave it better. Everyone's talking about ESG and environmentalism, but leave it better. We want to leave the world a better place every day, every year, and pass on good things to our successors. And we like to show this in a picture. So you have the vision at the top. You have the constituents we serve on the sides. So that's our vision and mission. And then really there's 3 aspects to the way we do business here at Martinrea. At the center of it all is the golden rule. Again, treating people the way you want to be treated, with dignity and respect. There's 2 aspects of our operations that we emphasize. One is the lean thinking way. And briefly, it means take out waste. In order to be efficient, in order to provide job security for your people, an opportunity for your people, you have to be able to take waste out. If you can't in a competitive world, you won't be in business for a long time. And then on the other side, it's entrepreneurship. And that doesn't mean throwing the dice and taking a risk. It means own your business, own what you do. We emphasize that from the receptionist all the way to the executive suite and everywhere in between. If you can own your process, own what it is you do, we think that you will make the right decisions on behalf of the enterprise. And it works extremely well when you trust people and give them that opportunity. This just is a pictorial. 80% of our people are in North America. We have about 2,500 in Canada, about 5,000 in the United States, 5,000 in Mexico. We have about 2,500 in Europe. We also have 4 plants in China, sales office in Japan. We have a small plant in South Africa. In Europe, we're in Eastern Europe, Slovakia, which of course is close to Ukraine, as well as Western Europe, and we have a plant in Brazil. So we really do span the world in terms of our plants. It's a worldwide industry, and we're everywhere. It's always good to see what you do. So basically, we make structures, and on the left side you see body, white, and chassis. We make a lot of the metal on a vehicle that you don't see. So we don't necessarily do the doors, but when you're sitting in your seats, you're supported by structures. And we also make structures for things like buses, and we make fluid systems, so fuel lines, brake lines, and fuel tanks, and that type of thing. And when people say, what kind of company are you? Like, what do you do? Some are in the electronics, et cetera. We're essentially a lightweighting company. We do different materials. We use aluminum, we use steel, high strength steels, different products in order to make these structures. And lighter and stronger is the name of the game. Anything that moves, if you can make something lighter, you get better miles per gallon, less greenhouse gas emissions. If you're talking about an electric vehicle, you go further on a charge. So this is one of the fundamental, most important aspects of the automotive industry, I'd say the transportation industry, because it has so much in the way of implications of making a better product in a more economically and environmentally efficient product. So the highlight of this is, how do we navigate a world? I could list 50 major issues that we look at, but we face a lot of issues internationally that many of you on the diplomatic side face all the time. And I like top 10 lists. So I figured I'd just put 10 together, and I'll touch on them very briefly. Obviously, a big issue in the last 2 years for our industry has been the pandemic, how to deal with the lockdown, how to come back. Our industry was basically shut down worldwide for 3 months in 2020. And we had to come back, and figure out how to make parts again. But the focus was, how do we keep our people safe? How do we keep them work? You have to work in order to put food on the table in many of the countries in which we operate. Not every country can, pay people to stay home because they got the healthcare systems and so forth. So we worked extremely hard on protocols. We came back and we kept our people safe. I'm very proud of that as a company. We even, made masks. We made 10 million masks, which we've distributed to our people and their families. We're the people that made the ventilator stands for the GM Ventec ventilator enterprise. And so very busy there. The big issue today that you're probably very aware of is international supply chains. Last year, coming out of the pandemic and making parts again, we found out that, we had a shortage of chips, particularly in the automotive industry. And it was a very tough year last year that we're just coming out of now, but we're seeing supply chain issues everywhere, in part because of the international aspect of the supply chains. International trade policy, which is something that many of you work on a lot, obviously a huge issue. I would say spent a good part of the last 5 years working on the USMCA, working with Minister Freeland and also the Mexican government as we negotiate with the United States on this regional trade policy. But other issues arise as well, and we deal with that every day as we move parts around and deal cross-border. Obviously, we deal with potential conflicts. Russia and Ukraine is front page news today. It has ramifications. Our energy costs in Europe are 4 times higher today than they were a year ago, in part because of the cost of gas coming from different places, but including Russia. Obviously, the potential of hard conflicts affects us when we're a worldwide player. Similarly, soft conflicts, things like cyber threats. There's a great book, This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends, that was a bestseller last year and just shows the ramifications of cyber issues. Every board meeting we have a cybersecurity update because it's absolutely mission critical to how we make parts in a worldwide supply chain. And, now number 6, I'm only getting to climate change and electrification. Of course, everyone knows a number of the initiatives there, the electrification of our industry, the importance of ESG to all our stakeholders and our employees, which we take seriously. And then you get to the economy. Obviously, we've seen economic impacts of the pandemic and so forth. We've come back in a lot of ways pretty well in a lot of parts of the world, but now there's issues of inflation and what's happened with interest rates, high interest rates. Do people buy less cars? How does that affect our ability to borrow money to invest capital and so forth? Again, issues there, and we spend a lot of time talking with our governments on that. The next three kind of relate to people. I think we live in a world where people don't listen to each other as much anymore as they should. And I think many people would agree with that. But very often, you can't have the compromise middle of the road discussion. We know, for example, that EVs and electrification is coming, but it can't just come by the stroke of a pen and be here in 2 years. We've got to transition. We've got to be able to do different things. And yet, very often from each side, from all sides, we see extreme positions, which it's hard to figure out necessarily the right way to go. And there's implications to taking any position. Number 9 is finding good people and talent. Absolutely huge. We have plants all over the world. We love being in all the countries that we are. People are fantastic. They're all willing to work and so forth. But one of the reasons we have an international supply chain is you're trying to find people to make the parts for the vehicles that you make. And I would say that our culture that we talked about applies everywhere. If you're in Mexico, we follow the culture, but it's clearly a Mexican plant. If we're in Slovakia, it's clearly a Slovakian plant, but the culture is the same. You still got to treat people right and so forth. You still got to be lean and entrepreneurial. And then the final point I'd make is, good leadership. You have to be able to influence your company and your people to do the right thing so that we're around 10 years from now and 20 years from now. People look to the leadership of a company to make the right decisions. And actually, inside this company, I feel this every day. We've got to make decisions that kind of affect 16,000 people, most of whom have spouses. So let's say another 14,000, and most of whom have dependents. So we could be making decisions that affect 50,000 people. We have to be in business and take care of them. And I think leadership, corporate leadership is very important. Political leadership in our institutions, such as our churches and our schools and so forth. And people say, how do you get to be a good leader? How do you deal with that? You got to care for your people. You have to be seen to care for your people. You have to create a zone of comfort for them so that, when they come to work, it's a place that they can be safe. They have to feel safe. They have to feel mentally safe as well as physically safe. And if you can do that, then you're making people's lives better, which is the fundamental part of our vision. So I'll leave it there. I just want to touch on a few things just to show you the scope of areas that we may want to touch on if you like. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Rob. We appreciate that. I'm just going to jump right into some questions I have. Also, these are questions that were sent in earlier by some of the folks that are on the call right now. There's a lot of talk about nearshoring and reshoring and the localization of production as a result of a lot of the changes over the last couple of years and concerns. Yep. Do you expect that fears about the supply chain security and resilience will lead to more domestic investment in Canada? And would that be the same in other countries, that they would be, again, just more careful about the supply chain and how far afield it goes?
Yeah, no question. I mean, international supply chains has brought a lot of prosperity around the world. There's no question of that. I'm a believer in trade, and if we could run our business without borders, that would be great. But I do think we're going to see, we've seen a lot of reshoring, a lot of people talking about it, and I think a lot of it's going to be regional. Actually, I'm a big believer in, for example, in North America, in the North American trade area. Canada's got tremendous resources, lots of people, lots of space. U.S. has lots of resources, lots of consumers. Mexico's got lots of resources, lots of wonderful people. And as a trade area, it works pretty well. And I can see the same thing in the context of Southeast Asia, where you basically have two trading areas. One is China and one is everyone but China. And then I think you've got Europe. And then so we interface there. For a company like ours, we tend to produce in the region for the region. And then I would say, let's take, semiconductor chips for example. That is something that I think over 50% of chip development is still in North America, but most of manufacturing is outside of it. It is a mistake to essentially not have a secure supply chain for something so fundamental. So I can see chip capacity being built up in North America, maybe the United States, but I'd see a certain amount in Canada and Mexico as well over time.
Interesting. So more regional focus.
Yeah.
And that way you can tap the strengths of each of the regions, and within those regions allocate the capital accordingly. Interesting.
Yeah.
Increasing geopolitical tensions. How is that impacting sort of the allocation of capital and what countries you're prepared to invest in, and what you're seeing the big automakers who you obviously partner with? Yeah. Are they shifting some of their interests also with some of the geopolitical tensions out of the Far East and so on?
Yeah, I've always believed that when you do a IRR calculation or a return calculation, you've got to put in geopolitical risk. Making $1 in China, for example, is not as valuable as $1 in Canada that goes in your bank, and so you have to assess that. I think the geopolitical risks are very interesting. We get the Eurasia Group's geopolitical outlook on Monday morning at 8 o'clock every week. And directors get it, and senior executives get it, and anyone else who wants to get it, just to kind of see what's going on in the world. And I do think that we've seen an increase in geopolitical risk with the pandemic, with the US-China discussions, and obviously some of the stuff we're seeing in Europe. You cannot be a senior executive of an international business organization such as ours in the automotive industry or any other industry without having familiarity with that, for sure.
One of the questions I know that would be on the minds of quite a few people on this call would be, how would you assess the role of China in the future of the automotive industry? Yeah. And what are their strengths and weaknesses, and how do we position given some of their aggressiveness?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. They're basically, trying to leapfrog the industry with being first to market in the whole electrification side, and I think that's drawing a lot of technology. I think we're seeing a lot of technology in Europe and North America as well. There's no question it's the biggest market in the world right now. It's drawn a lot of people to invest there. I think that there's a lot more hesitation. For example, for parts suppliers to locate there. Our philosophy with China has been to partner with a local Chinese supplier that's not in North America or Europe, for example, and we'll work with them, and we work with some of the biggest Chinese companies. So China is going to be a very big market, but I'd say to a lot of people, buyer beware if you're going to set up there. Be in China for China. And for a number of companies, we say, if things turn bad, like a trade war or something worse, make it a flesh wound. Don't make it a mortal wound for your company. I think you've got to be extremely careful on that. And I think there are tremendous opportunities elsewhere. So we've got a lot of partnerships, not necessarily so formal, with a lot of people across the pond.
Okay, and back to Canada just for a moment. What are Canada's greatest strengths in the auto and manufacturing sectors, and what are the biggest risks looking ahead for us as a country?
Well, we make things really well. We've got, at CAPSI, we have a list of, kind of a top 10 things that are, that measure Canada against other jurisdictions, say in North America, because it tends to be a regional market. And a number of strengths include, our immigrant population. We have a very good, hardworking population that stick around. Like the tenure of workers at our plants, typically in Canada, are much higher than the US, much higher than Mexico. And there's a cost. There's a cost to, having to get new people. I would say that, our tax system for a while was better than the United States. Now it's a little worse in the context of depreciation and actual tax. The lower dollar helps somewhat. And the access to market that we have is very important. Canadian suppliers, let me just give you one stat. It's an amazing stat. But over the 20 years ago when we started, we had zero revenues. Linamar, one of Canada's auto parts suppliers, had $1 billion, and Magna had 10. So about 11 billion in revenues. Today, the three of us combined have 60 Canadian-based auto parts suppliers that haven't really increased their footprint in Canada, increasing in the United States and Mexico and around the world. So one of the things we're extremely good at is being competitive. It's an amazing stat. So I would say the other thing is, very briefly, we make vehicles together with a lot in the northern U.S. And so without a border, basically, that's a big vehicle manufacturing area. And we make 8 million vehicles a year. That's a lot. We've got the Detroit, Toronto corridor. It's a pretty good place to do business.
I know that, again, given the different folks on the call here, Europe, you mentioned a little bit about the increase in costs of energy in Europe. What are some of the major challenges for automotive producers in Europe, and how do you see that particular market shaking out, again, with some of the ambassadors, some of the business people that are on this call?
No, it's a very good question. I think the biggest issue in Europe is cost. The cost structure, the wage structure, the labor structure, costs to build parts or vehicles in, say, Germany are very high, almost uncompetitive. Okay, so you've got to use technology and so forth. What saves Europe to a certain extent is the fact that you can move work into lower cost countries. We've got a plant in Slovakia. It's a beautiful country, beautiful location, and you've got to effectively work that out in order to have a competitive industry, just as we do in North America. We've got Mexico, we've got the States, South, Middle, and North, and in Canada. So I'd say, that's the strength. I know a lot of people in Europe say, we have technology, we like technology. Well, we like it here in North America too, and we're every bit as good. So when you've got similar technologies, then cost is a differentiator. So that's the challenge, and a lot of people are meeting it. Make no mistake, there's a lot of investment in R&D and technology, but you've got to deliver that. And I'd say the argument's the same. I see we have the ambassador from South Korea. They've done an extremely good job with technology, and they compete very well because they're leading edge.
You mentioned one of the challenges, and that's hitting the whole world, is this increased inflation and the pressure to hold down costs coming from the automakers. Obviously, when you're the auto parts company, you're stuck in the middle a little bit of that vice where you've got the big companies trying to keep the cost down. How are you managing the inflation costs and building that into your cost structure? And do you see this as transitory, like some in the Federal Reserve had mentioned, or do you see this as a little bit more systemic and longer lasting from your vantage point?
Yeah, I think ultimately the industry will adjust because everyone has to make a buck or you won't survive. But right now, I'd say in the last year and a half, it's been extremely tough on suppliers. I think in part because they felt that, the pandemic was transitory when it started, okay, this 3-month hit and we're going to come back and everything will be okay. But it's clearly not okay in the context of, the OEMs or the original equipment manufacturers are making good money. They're announcing record profits because there's huge demand for vehicles because there's so limited number of vehicles that are being made because of chip shortages and so forth. And we've seen tremendous inflation, particularly in the US on labor. We've seen energy costs, particularly in Europe. We've seen increased costs of things such as resin and things like aluminum and steel, most of which we're hedged by because we're on resale programs, have also gone up. And so what we're seeing is suppliers everywhere are having very tough discussions with their customers saying, the world's changed, and ultimately, if you want our product, you got to pay our price. And so that's the type of thing that we're seeing today. I would say that it's been described as, between the supply base and the OEMs, and 85% of a vehicle is made by the supply base. We're basically at war, and different customers are doing different things, but it's a very interesting dynamic, right, for sure.
The whole issue of robotics and automation in the industry. Have you found that robotics and automation at Martinrea are replacing jobs, labor jobs? And what do you think the impact of that is going to be on the labor markets? Does labor just get reallocated to other positions, create other opportunities, or just? I've been in your plants; they're fairly automated, and there's not a lot of people in some of them.
Yeah, there's that's a very interesting question. It's a deeper question. Once you start peeling back the layers, the first thing is in a number of places, you have to automate just to be competitive. So you save jobs, you actually save plants. We've got a plant in Toronto, which is what one would say is a high wage jurisdiction. That is as automated as anything you can see. We're putting in a line for one customer that has no people on it, but it employs people to set up the lines and maintain the lines. And so that's very interesting. And we try and automate everywhere. The second thing is that it attracts more technical people. So if we're going to look at, attracting diversity into our plants, the fact that we're doing high-tech jobs and everything else, we attract a lot of people that have technical backgrounds. You can attract many more people that don't view this as a physical job, an overly physical job. We're attracting more women into our plants. We're up to about 31% female workforce and that type of thing. And that's got tremendous implications because you can actually increase your workforce by changing your the way you do things. You're not looking, for brawny, bulky, middle-aged men. You're looking for people that have the talent to run programs and everything. So I think it's actually, tremendously exciting for the industry and a real opportunity. And then once you're doing that, this is the third aspect, I think it increases the possibilities of what you can do with your talent. I said we made ventilator stands in the pandemic. In Canada, the big issue is, no one was making PPE or protective personal equipment in Canada. We didn't make any masks. So we bought a mask machine and we made 10 million masks. We didn't make a bunch of other things. That's the talent that once you look at how you can make things, particularly using machinery, robotics, artificial intelligence, you can make anything. And that is a tremendous opportunity for this country and any country that invests in that.
Yeah, we had the question that came in, which is also very interesting. It's a big issue, but how can companies in the global economy, companies like yours, which operates in various jurisdictions, promote justice in the world? And it's a big question. And how do you give thought to that? And maybe just a couple of quick points on how you can see the corporate sector working with governments to actually further justice in the world.
Yeah, well, I spent a lot of time working with governments. I mean, just before we were on, it was actually the auto supply business that went to court to get the injunction to clear the blockade on the Windsor Bridge. So I guess that's more than working with governments. That's doing their job for them as far as that goes. But I go back to the cultural statements that we made. That is something we live. My CEO lives it, my CFO lives it, our business unit leaders live, our HR people, our general managers in our plant. And it's all about making lives better. Everyone wants to be a proud member of their local community, right? So when we're in Kentucky or when we're in Saltillo, Mexico, or when we're in Slovakia, or we're in China, we want people to be proud of where they work. And so that making lives better, that culture applies there as well. And so in essence, you're an ambassador, like I'm an ambassador too, just like a number of people on this call. You're an ambassador of what your culture and what your philosophy is. It's an extension of who you are as a person. And corporations have personalities. There's no question that some corporations have bad personalities and some have very good ones. And so in that context, and people are people. So when I'm in China, and I've been in China for 2 years because of a bunch of things that have happened. When I'm in China, people are people. They still like eating lunch. They still like showing you what they're making, and they're very proud of working there. And it's the same thing when you're in a plant in Mexico. It's the same thing when you're in Brazil, and the same thing as when you're in Spain and elsewhere. And so, in that sense, I think corporations can do a lot of good. People don't have to work for us. Right? We live in a world when, it's hard to find talent, it's hard to find people, and people have their choices. And so you want to be a place where people want to come to work. They want to talk to the people, they want to feel safe, be safe, and everything else. So the stuff that I talk about on culture answers that type of question. We are the type of company that we found a lot of communities want us to be there. You know why? Because we take care of our people. At the end of the day, you You got to take care of your people. You got to love your people. You got to serve your people. If you do that, answers a lot of questions pretty quick.
Just a couple quick questions on the electric vehicle market, which is the
Sure.
big elephant in the room.
Yeah.
We see it all through the investment industry. Just this whole conversion that's being really pushed hard. In your opinion, what's the potential for Canada to become a player in the electric vehicle industry? And that would be, you know, sort of on the assembly and the parts side. I know Premier Ford is talking about batteries and different technologies. What are you seeing in that side for Canada?
Well, I would say, first of all, you know, at CAPSI, we've had $5 billion of investment announcements over the last couple of years. I'd like to say it was, you know, since I became chair of CAPSI, I had nothing to do with it, but it was in process. And that includes, you know, Ford Oakville is going to make purely electric vehicles in its next iteration of vehicles in a couple of years. So we've had a number of positive announcements there. I think as long as Canada, and we had a CAPSI meeting this morning, but as long as Canada continues to make and assemble vehicles, and we make about 1.5 million per year, which is about, you know, pro rata, a little bit above our weight in terms of North American population, then we'll have access to it. But the way we look at it in Ontario is really it's a North American market. So as long as we have access to that, we can do a fair bit. On the EV side, in terms of batteries, it's interesting. You know, this is a battery that we will be making at a company that we've invested in called Volta Explorer. It'll be the first Canadian-made battery in the EV space, and we'll see what we do with it. We're trying to graphene enhance batteries. But I think that what Canada's pitch has been is it's not just the assembly of battery makers, but we have, if you take a look at the whole supply chain, running from the production of cobalt and nickel, which are parts of the battery, we have a lot of that. And so you got to be part of the whole supply chain as well. We also are a pretty good source of electric power, especially in Quebec, where it's relatively cheap. So I think there's a role for us to play. What we have to make sure is that we don't get caught up in the quote provincialism that we're seeing. I think we've got to be part of a North American solution, and you know, to a certain extent, I think Canada's got a role to play as far as that goes. In terms of how fast all this is going to come, you know, politicians are dreaming if they think we can legislate, you know, 50% EV usage in 3 years. That is, you know, that's more than dreaming. I think it's dangerous. But I do think we'll see, you know, 25 to 30% potential battery electric vehicles by the end of the decade. And we're still going to see internal combustion engine for a while. And I do think we've got to build the infrastructure up to kind of deal with that. And that's going to take some time, but it's doable.
Are you seeing, and how are you preparing for new entrants into the auto manufacturing sector? You hear about, I mean, Rivian, obviously Tesla has made great inroads. Apple, it's suggested that Apple also might be getting involved in electrical vehicles. How do you prepare for that? How do you keep those, you know, relationships and keep the conversations going so that you don't miss out on some of that new?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, Tesla is a customer of ours, Lucid is a customer of ours. Rivian, we don't do much, but you know, I think they've made 3 vehicles so far. And I do think that, you know, GM and Ford and that type of thing are making a lot of them. By 2025, 25% of our products will be going on electric vehicles, most with traditional manufacturers. And for most of our stuff is EV agnostic, like a lightweight structure they might be different, but it's still a structure that goes on a vehicle. But I think you're absolutely right. You know, you've got to keep an open mind of who you work with. The reality is that the people that make the vehicle, the electric folks and everything else, they need people to make parts for the vehicles. 85% of vehicle is assembled by the parts makers. The parts makers are expert in making those parts, much more than the OEMs in a lot of ways. That's why there's outsourcing. And so what happens is all these folks tend to search us out. So if you're looking for structural parts, you know, we're I believe the second largest in size in North America to Magna. So anyone that says, okay, I want to build a structure for my EV, who's going to help me out with it? we'll be getting a call. And we've talked to a lot of those folks for sure.
So in fact, some of the newer players who wouldn't have the manufacturing capabilities or production, that could be a great increased opportunity for the auto parts companies to do more assembly.
Absolutely.
And do more of the value creation in terms of the vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can sit and co-design a lot of different. So let me give you an example. So a battery tray, an EV will need a battery tray. We make structural parts. We can make battery trays, and they can be aluminum. They can be high strength steel. They're big structural parts. The batteries that go in them get hot, so we have to make containers for them. We're in the fluid systems business, so we make gas lines and brake lines, but we can make coolant lines which go through the battery tray. So we can sit with a Lucid, for example, or a General Motors and say, all right, what type of battery, where do you want them, all that type of stuff, and how do we deal with your heat issue, right? Because quite frankly, if batteries get hot, you have to stop the vehicle and let it cool down, then that hurts your range and everything else. So in that context, we've got design teams working on a lot of that stuff as we speak. It's very, very interesting, very exciting.
A quick question on forecasts, and then I'm going to ask just a couple of personal questions.
Sure.
The auto sales reached, as far as I can tell, about 75 million units in 2019, and then dropped down to about 64 million in 2020. When are you predicting for us that we're going to surpass 2019 numbers in terms of auto production globally?
Well, it just so happens that at CAPSI we were looking at the numbers this morning, and these are estimates, and it means you got to get through supply chain issues and all that type of stuff, but we think we'll be back at 2019 levels probably by next year. And that's on a worldwide basis, which is pretty good. I would say, North America, if you look at North American numbers, and we tend to look at production levels because, we make parts. And so how many cars are produced are more relevant for the part side. But, we reached a peak of about between 17 and 18 million a few years ago. And we think, we could be hitting 17 million plus in terms of North American production by 2024 and keeping that steady. The interesting thing right now is with all the supply chain issues that we have, the issue is not demand. There's a lot of demand there. The fact is that people can't get vehicles and they're buying despite, they're buying them without any incentives, and they're paying premium price. The car companies are making a fortune because of a shortage of vehicles, but that shortage doesn't go away. And as long as the underlying economy is okay and the cost of borrowing is not ridiculous, people are going to continue to buy vehicles. There's a big pent up demand there right now.
I know, Rob, you're a strong Christian, and we share that strong Christian faith. How does your faith impact day-to-day business decisions? And one person actually asked this question: how has your faith led you to make an unpopular operational decision? There's a good question for you.
Look, the culture that I went through, that's my personal view. It's an easy one to support, but it's very consistent with my worldview. I think, in our company, we don't hide it. I don't want someone to hide that they're a Muslim or an atheist or whatever. This has got to be a place where we respect individuals, and it works extremely well in that context, right? And so I wake up every morning, I come into work, and I've got a work family. I've got a home family that I love, and I got a work family that I love. And I love helping people make things and, making people's lives better. So to me, and we kind of did this deliberately because, our vision statement 15 years ago was to be the best auto parts supplier, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're looking at things a little differently, right? And I think over the last couple of years in particular, although, we've seen crises in this industry. Our first day together, we started in 2001. Our first day was September 10, 2001. So the second day we had, we thought maybe not a good time to start a business the day before 9/11. And in 2008 and 9, those were tough times too. And we thought that, our customers were going bankrupt, and we wanted to make sure that we could survive. In the last couple of years, it's been very easy to come in and say, okay, we've got to keep our people safe. We've got to keep our world safe. We've got to be able to show that, with COVID, before vaccines, that people have to be able to come to work because they got to earn a living and be safe and follow protocols and encourage people and everything else. It's almost been, I won't quite say missionary zeal, but it has been absolutely motivating for us to do a lot of that stuff. And in terms of the unpopular side, there are times when you got to make decisions. I remember once I turned down a job, I actually left, probably the best paying job of my life, by saying, we just have a different perspective on things. And my employer / partner said, I can't understand why you're leaving. I would have made you rich. And I said, look, I am rich. I just have a different balance sheet than you do. And, that was a good punchline for a movie. I really like that. But in the context of people, things, one of the things that we've had to do, if we're going to live this culture, then there are certain things that you can't tolerate in terms of how people are treated. So, I've had to have a discussion with people to let them go, even though they were, almost superstars in the business, and say, that's unacceptable. We have to make a change. And by the way, I'm the first one to say, if you make a mistake, try and fix it and everything else. But, this was a decision where, the person had friends and all that type of stuff, but you got to do the right thing and take the potential hit. But it's those times that people notice what you do. Back when I was at the law firm, if a customer or a client, mistreated my secretary or my receptionist, they were fired. And, and the interesting thing is that, you lose the business, but you actually make business because everyone that works with you knows that you're walking your talk. And if you can do that, the loyalty and the productivity and, just the esprit de corps and so forth, are extremely important, and it works extremely, extremely well. And, and by the way, you shouldn't even have to stop to think about it too much. Just if you do the right thing, if you try and do the right thing, things tend to work out okay. And even if they don't from one perspective, they probably, work well another. There was a saying, I think it was Billy Graham. He says, if you lose money, you lose nothing. If you lose health, you lose something. If you lose character, you lose everything.
Yeah. You can't put a price on integrity and character. I know we've just been following your company over the years, how you've stood tall and stood for a highly ethical position, and it's made all the difference. Just one sort of follow up on that. ESG, environmental social governance, is the buzzwords. I'm in the investment business. Everyone's talking about ESG. A lot of it's virtue signaling, I find, and I don't really find it being very real. How does your faith and your principles at Martinrea translate into a real and substantive look at the whole issue of ESG?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a lot of virtual signaling. We've just done our first sustainability report, which, the basic instruction was it's got to be reflective of our company, not just, the check the box type thing. So let me give you a subset of the example. So diversity and inclusion, right? If you're following the golden rule, then you don't need a diversity and inclusion. You just don't. I don't care whether you're male or female. I don't care what your skin color is. I will say I do have a bias. I like hiring immigrants. I like hiring immigrants and children of immigrants because we've done extremely well and they're very entrepreneurial and they love what they do and everything. So I have a bias. Let's recognize everyone has a bias. And I think people feel that. At the same time, because of the world that we're in, we look at what those suggestions are and that type of stuff. And we'll obviously make decisions based on it. But in the context of talent, in order for us to really take care of our people, the right people have to be in the right places on the bus, and everybody recognizes that, and that includes anyone from a minority group. But I would say that we're probably ahead of most targets on a lot of stuff, and we're proud about it. Now, one thing I will say about automotive in particular is we've had a perception problem for women, right, in terms of work, and that's probably because guys like driving cars, but women like driving cars too. And what we've done, and we're part of a big pitch in terms of attracting women into our industry overall and our company overall. And there we basically say, when you're hiring, make sure that you're going to these places, make sure that you're encouraging women to apply and all that type of stuff as well. And it works. And then on the diversity front, I don't know if you know, but we have, the Canada, the country, announced a $200 million program to support purchases from Indigenous businesses. We have a diversity program where every year we buy over $200 million from minority-owned business in the United States. And we did that without a law, right? We just did it because, quite frankly, it's good businesses. Our customers like it, and it works extremely well.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Well, I think we're getting near the end of our official time here, Rob. And do you have any sort of closing comments that you'd like to make, sort of just to summarize the discussion and other thoughts that you think would be valuable to the ambassadors on the call, along with the business folks?
From our perspective, I've been privileged to be able to do many different things. Some would say I can't figure out what I want to do with my life. I can't pick a job, but I've had the privilege of working with a lot of people building things. And I think there's tremendous opportunity to do that in many different areas of the world. And if you can, live your life and live your business life with purpose, which can be very consistent with the purpose that you have in your personal life. And, I think there's tremendous opportunity, and you'll enjoy every minute of what you do. So that, as they say, your hobby, but your job is your hobby. I love what I do. I work hard, but because of the fact that I'm helping a lot of people and have that privilege, it's pretty easy and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you very, very much, Rob, for the time, for the insightful comments. I know, having known you for many years now, I know you just have a unique vantage point, and you've been put in a very unique position, and we are thankful for that, because I know you've had a lot of influence on both the Canadian government and also the Ontario government in positive ways, keeping the industry going and keeping that very practical business-like approach, which is necessary when you sometimes are dealing with governments that can sometimes become a little more bureaucratic. And it's good to have the private sector in there pushing things, and also just to hear about how your Christian faith influences how Martinrea is run. It's exciting to see that those timeless principles are being executed well within the organization. And of course, the beauty of it is they work marvelously well. I just want to finish up with just a couple of comments. The one word that stood out in my mind most recently is the word freedom. Freedom. We've heard a lot about freedom, and that's probably because the last 2 years we've had a lot of restrictions put on us because of the pandemic. And even more recently in Canada, we had the Freedom Convoy. I think all around the world, there's millions of people that are seeking political freedom, economic freedom, physical freedom. And we can understand exactly why that would be the case, especially after the last couple of years. But I think most people don't realize that the most important freedom and is the one that underpins all other freedoms, and that's spiritual freedom. That's the spiritual freedom that we all need. Jesus Christ in John 8, verse 36 stated clearly, "So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." And he's talking about free from the slavery of sin. The Apostle Paul in Galatians 5:1 makes the same point when he says, "For freedom Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to the yoke of slavery." And so our greatest need is to be really set free from our sins, to have peace with God. We can never know true political, economic, or physical freedom without having the burden or yoke of our sin removed from us. And the beauty of Christianity and the truth of the scriptures that makes it clear that this takes place through the death of Jesus Christ, that it is Jesus, ultimately God's one and only Son, who bore our sin and took our punishment, so that all of those who put their faith in him and turn in repentance from their sin can be set free both now and forever when it comes to their spiritual bondage. And so the most important And foundational freedom is to know that your sins are completely forgiven and that you have a right relationship with God. And for me, this is the real freedom convoy of 2022. Ultimately, we need that spiritual freedom. And there's no government can touch this freedom, and no emergency act can take away the freedom that a believer has in Jesus Christ. And we want everybody on this call ultimately to know the freedom that can come through faith in Jesus Christ. And we certainly want to encourage everybody to explore their faith and to challenge themselves in terms of what their core belief system is. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Darlene McLean.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Really appreciate your moderating this time, but also sharing how we can indeed know freedom, each and every one of us, whatever our context, and a freedom that just opens up all kinds of possibilities in life, because we are able to live our life to our fullest potential. So indeed, that is our hope for each and every one, that we can experience the freedom that Jesus offers to each and every one. And so to our guests as well, we want to thank you for your participation and questions. I do want to also thank the Christian Embassy team and volunteers for your preparations and facilitation of this webinar. We value your feedback and desire to serve you by pointing you to helpful resources. So please go to our website, christianembassy.ca, and you will find a number of resources there. For those of you who need to leave us now, we want to bid you farewell. For those who've got a little bit more time, please stay on. And in just a moment, we will take those questions.
I'm looking at a few extra questions that have come in. So let me just refer these over to you, Rob, in terms of, there's some good questions here. Due to the global car chip shortage, manufacturers are having problems producing cars. Could you just speak a little bit more to what you're seeing in the chip area and the shortages, and how long that will continue, and what kind of impact that would have on the auto industry?
Yeah, good question. I mean, the transparency on this is very difficult, in part because customers don't always share and they don't always know. Because I think what we found out is many suppliers use chips for their product, and the customers are only now getting a line on. So I would say Q3, at least in our experience, was probably the worst quarter. Q4, a little better. What we're seeing now is some OEMs have seemed to get a pretty good line on chips. Some have designed some parts to not have chips. So for example, you might not get, a heated seat, or you might not get your, automatic connection to your air pressure in your wheels or something like that, so they can produce more vehicles. They've simplified their product offerings. What we're seeing is Q1 is better than Q4. And what most people are saying, by the end of the year, we should be fine. Some, I'd say a minority are saying it might go into next year. And some are saying, it should be okay by the end of the second quarter. I think the second half of this year, we'll start to see improvements. In 2023 should be pretty good. And sometimes it depends on the particular OEM and their priorities. And to a certain extent, the other thing I'll say is some people are not hurting from this chip shortage. And when people are not hurting from the chip shortage, then they don't mind the chip shortage. That includes a number of chip companies, and it includes a number of vehicle manufacturers, because they've been selling, trucks at high premiums with less incentives. And if you look, I think Stellantis announced this morning, record profits, and every employee in the United States has a 1-year bonus for profit sharing, averaging 14,000 US. That's a lot of money. So when people are making money, they're less inclined to move things along. Now the supply base is not making a whole lot of money, so they're pushing things extremely hard. And we'll see where we go. But it's interesting. We had a quarterly call when the chip shortage started, and someone said it was a blip. And I was asked this on our earnings call, and I said, I think it's a blimp as opposed to a blip. And unfortunately, I've been right.
There's an interesting question here that we didn't talk about, and that is the hydrogen, the use of hydrogen as an energy source, and the impact again on the auto industry and what you're seeing there. I know that it's being used in large vehicles, buses, trains, large transportation vehicles. What do you see in that space?
I'm not the hydrogen expert, but I would say my CEO is my partner. Basically started General Motors, but he was a big Toyota person. He actually ran the plant in Numi in Georgetown, the biggest Toyota assembly plant in the world. And Toyota, which is many ways the leading car company in the world, or one of them for sure, has always believed in hydrogen. And so there's still a lot of research there. I know people that are involved in the hydrogen industry, a lot of development. There are people that say, the real breakthrough is going to be hydrogen, not lithium ion batteries. Even the lithium ion battery issue, people are talking about solid state batteries and so forth, because there are a lot of issues with lithium ion on batteries. Elon Musk notwithstanding, as far as that goes. So I think that, the propulsion of vehicles ultimately is an open question as to who's ultimately going to win. And I think that as we look to electrification, as we look to so much that we want to try and do in terms of reducing emissions and that type of thing, the solution is going to be innovation and adaptation, not government regulation that says you're going to be net zero. I really do believe that we're going to see a lot of breakthrough, and I have tremendous confidence in a lot of people to make a lot of developments. 2050, if that's the goal, that's 28 years away. Well, when I started my law firm in 1993, which was roughly 28 years, no one had heard of the internet other than Al Gore, who said he invented it. But we were at an era when you couldn't pass things across email. Just think of how much the world has changed in 28 years. So I think we'll see a lot of developments, and the discussions we have, and we have these discussions all the time. We had a very good discussion yesterday on innovation in our industry. All I know is we're going to see a ton of it, and we've got to be flexible enough to deal with it. But I don't think you can pick a winner at this stage, because a lot of stuff's going to be developed.
Yeah. One of our participants really likes your top 10 list. I'm sure all of them do. But it also points out that in the political environment that we're in, political parties and some of the bureaucrats don't seem to be as interested in unifying and a bit more dividing. And so how do you work that political conversation? I know in previous conversations with you, you have been in high-level government discussions and trying to get them to, walk back some of the decisions and so forth. So how does business help impact government so that they're not as divisive as we've seen more recently, and work for the unity and for the betterment of the economy and for the consumer?
Well, that's an excellent question, as are all these questions. Wow, he's pretty good. But so my personal approach is I have three levels of approach. One is the personal one, where I talk to these folks and text them and go back and forth, and that's personal Rob. Where if I think something is a really bad idea, I say that's a really bad idea for the following reasons, but I won't embarrass you publicly on it, because quite frankly, you often ask me for questions. The second one is, it's kind of an industry role, and just to use an example, when we were looking at the USMCA, we're a big supplier in Mexico, a big supplier in the United States, big supplier in Canada. Us and Magna probably have the two best footprints, and the whole USMCA was, about auto. 98% was auto, and we basically, and I said this to Chrystia Freeland, I said, we will provide you every piece of information that you need. Won't embarrass you, but you can use it so that we can have the right thing, because we want a unified North America. Did the same thing with Mexico and the United States. But we were effectively the government department. And we were like, when Americans were making a proposal, we saw it at the same time. And we could work through it quietly, confidentially, so that our negotiators and our civil service had the data, right? And to the extent that, when they were defining a direct production worker in terms of, the US $16 minimum wage, et cetera, we finally, Chrystia Freeland basically said, look, my guys are saying they disagree with you. So they flew into Toronto, and we negotiated and drafted the definition in the USMCA. So that's the type of service you can do because they need help. I believe very few politicians wake up in the morning and say, I want to screw up the world. Some do, but they don't necessarily want to. But they do want to listen and see at least, try and get that right, even if they disagree with you. And then the third area is public, right? Which, you've got to, basically say, look, this is really important. The automotive industry, for example, is a very important part of the Canadian economic future. And I would say today it's recognized. Everybody says that. In 2007, 15 years ago, people thought it was a smokestack industry, you're going to die, who cares? Mm-hmm. And that change has been because we've been very public about showing what we can do. And in that context, and then I'll say this, CAPC is a very interesting way to touch the government. And it's comprised of the car manufacturers, the supply-based members, the Dealers Association, Unifor, which is a union, and the Minister of Economic Development of Ontario, the Minister of Industry in Quebec, and the Minister of Innovation, Science, and Economic Development federally. So we actually get in a room and do the agenda and have the discussions. And there will be people that disagree a lot about what to do, but we all agree that it's good to have this industry in this country. And so, you wear a lot of different hats and you try not to burn any bridges, but there's places where you can be absolutely blunt and say, this is really stupid, or I really support this, or you need this. And the other ones where you say, let's just try and do the best that we can. In those circumstances, things tend to work. Our CAPC meeting, coming up, we'll probably have the environment minister. We're going to have an interesting discussion, right? But at the end of the day, it's no use putting in policies where you're not going to have an auto industry left in Canada.
Thank you so very much to you, Rob, for sharing your expertise, for as well, Jonathan, drawing that out. We know we could spend much more time together, but we're very, very grateful for that, which you've given to us. So I say a hearty thanks to you. Again, a thanks to those who've been with us, and may God bless you all. Que Dieu vous bénisse. Bye for now.
Have a great day. God bless.